Are you a thoughtful leader? Maybe you are. Maybe you think you are. Let's find out. I'm Mindy Gibbins-Klein. I'm author of The Thoughtful Leader and host of the Thoughtful Leader podcast. Thoughtful leadership is all about thought leadership that goes above and beyond. Thought leadership that is truly new and original, exciting, disruptive, maybe even groundbreaking. Because let's face it, we need to raise the bar. My guests and I are absolutely obsessed with finding truly original thought leadership, and I'm going to bring you so many exciting ideas and opportunities, things for you to think about, and chances for you to push your thinking that you'll be very glad you tuned in. So thanks so much for checking out Thoughtful Leadership and the Thoughtful Leader podcast. I look forward to connecting with you very, very soon. Welcome to the show. My guest today is the amazing thoughtful leader, Tim Robertson, who is an expert in sales. What he doesn't know about sales is not worth knowing. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mindy. Very kind of you to introduce me like that.
Well, you are an expert in more than just sales, but I think this is where I want to take the interview today, because a lot of people have misconceptions about sales or about themselves with regard to sales. And I think thoughtful leaders are willing to think about things and consider doing things in a different way. So listeners, if you're thinking, oh, I'm not good at sales, I don't like sales, sit up and listen to this man. We're going to start with how you got to where you are today, Tim. So tell us all about it.
Yes, absolutely, Mindy. It's really funny, actually, because I'm not a natural salesman myself. And it's really interesting that I've come on this journey, because originally I was a scientist and had this plan to become either a medic or work in the pharmaceutical industry, which I eventually did. But to be honest with you, the lure of a car when I left university and a salary while going on to do more research said to me, okay, this is worth exploring. And I've got to be honest with you, Mindy, the first 6 months of my role as a salesperson, because this was the chosen thing I did, I sort of fell into it rather than, pursuing anything else. I was absolutely, I was not horrified, but I thought this is not for me. And I really identify with a lot of people who are thinking, actually, sales is all about, pressurization, manipulation, all those kind of things that we identify with salespeople. And usually it's a used car salesman who tries to pressurize you into something. And my first taste of sales was a bit like that. And there was an incredibly pressurized role. If any of you know about pharmaceutical sales, you have to really, really be very driven to get to see the people you need to do, because the general practitioners and the consultants that you see are generally very busy people. And to be honest with you, they don't, really want to see you unless you've got something new. But the interesting thing that came to me, Mindy, and I've got to tell you this, is that after that first 6 months, I thought, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to go into marketing or something. And then the field coach, we all had a field coach, sat down and said, well, Tim, what's your impression of sales so far? And I said, well, it's all about manipulation, isn't it? And my goodness me, you could see his face absolutely fall apart. He said, Tim, no, it's all about helping people with problems or challenges they have at the moment, or some they may have in the future unless they're aware of the consequences. And that changed my whole perspective on it. And I urge anybody who thinks of the former element to think of the latter element of it. And that absolutely changed. And I went from someone who was thinking of leaving, the sales into somebody who actually really, really enjoyed it. I began to actually love the interactions with people, because I could see I naturally want to help people, and a lot of us do. And I could see that the help part of it was really something that identified with me. So my next few years, I went on, and I was lucky enough to become very successful in it. And that blossomed out a little bit into actually teaching or training people. And my first experiences were actually with GP practices, general practitioner surgeries, where I was doing all sorts of different training regimes with them, because they were transitioning at the time from being independent practitioners into what they call fund holding at the time. And that transition meant they had to learn about managing their surgery and all those kind of things. And it was that point I began to really, really enjoy the facilitation angle. And I was lucky enough to get good feedback, because we all need it, don't we? We all need to know that we're actually doing quite well at what we're doing. And after that period, I thought, actually, this is something I really enjoy and want to do. So to cut a long story short, about 10, 15 years into my career, I just said, right, I am going to stop working full time. I'm going to become a freelance sales trainer. When I told my father this, his response, I've got to tell you, his response was like, and I won't do his Scottish accent because he's Scottish. He said, "You're an idiot," basically said. "You're an idiot because you've got a wonderful job where you are very secure, good future, good pension. And why are you doing this? Because you're throwing, everything." And in fact, my then wife said exactly the same. So I had two people in my life saying, don't start your own business. Two people I respected and loved. Don't start your own business because, it's going to end in failure. And here we are 20 years later. Part of me is very glad that I didn't listen to them in some ways, because I'm a fairly driven person in some respects. But what I learned more about this whole element of my own personal is to take it in balance, because I became very, very focused in what I love doing, which is being with a group of people, getting them to firstly love the environment of being on a course with me and try and engage them, have fun with it, because I believe that learning is about fun as well. If we're having fun, then we tend to learn more. And it was after that I realized that I was focusing too much on my work. And it's something I have a tendency to do. If I do love something, I think we all do, you tend to focus on. And unfortunately, it meant that I lost a marriage because of it. And that's probably one of my biggest regrets around things, is actually I didn't do the balancing act.
Oh.
And that's the thoughtful bit in me that I began to realize looking back at it.
Well, look, you make decisions, choices, we all do. I would just correct you on one word that you used twice. And I don't know if the listeners noticed, but you said you were lucky that you did well, and you were lucky. Come on now. You applied yourself and you applied your passion, and it paid off. And so I would just ask you to consider when you use words like that, because, we have luck as well. But anyway, those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Mindy. I will consider them.
I hope your good luck continues, and your good skill level as well. So sales, let's just deal with the elephant in the room. Because I did, we've both said people have preconceptions and different ideas. What are some things that you believe about sales?
I think there are probably a couple, if not three things I believe that I think, whether we like it or not, Mindy, whether we really like it or not, all of us as part of our job at some stage, whether we've got the title sales in our job title, or whether we're actually an entrepreneur running a small business, we are all in sales. Whether we like it or not, at some point, there was a very, very great, and I urge anybody to look at this guy, Daniel Pink, and he wrote a book, To Sell Is Human. And what the research he did, he looked at people's job titles, and 84% of the time of those people who weren't in sales, they actually persuaded, they collaborated, they convinced, or they negotiated with people as part of their normal role. So I have a very strong feeling that if we really understand what sales is, and it's not what we think, it really isn't. Modern day sales isn't that sharp angle close or always be closing. And unfortunately, some of the media and some of the films that you see, like Glengarry Glen Ross and The Wolf of Wall Street, is another example of the parody of a salesperson, which is totally, totally wrong in my view. And that's the big change, I would say. It's also a lot easier than most people think. It really is not a process that is difficult once you understand the basic structure of a one-to-one situation. You're not trying to force anybody to do anything. You're not trying to pressurize them to anything. You're just having a conversation. And the number one thing that I would say about it's relationship first. It's relationship. Once you form that relationship with somebody, they trust you. Because what happens in the mind, there are three areas of the mind that actually control your ability to interact with somebody. The first one's called the amygdala, which is your threat center. And now what's that fired off? When somebody you don't know, that's fired off immediately. What's this person going to be like? Are they going to be friendly? Am I going to be attacked? Whatever. And that's your amygdala. Then there's a dorsolateral ventral cortex, which is another part of your brain, which actually releases dopamine. So the two are in opposition to each other. And dopamine's your happy chemical, if you like, in the brain. And when the two of them are balanced, then you feel quite normal. Now, what you're trying to do in the initial part of sales is fire off the dopamine the dopamine part of the brain, not the amygdala. You're trying to people feel that you're relaxed and you're friendly and you're warm. So then they lower their critical judgment. They don't start to criticize the person in front of them, and they actually accept what you're saying. And that's one of the key things. It's a lot easier. Just be nice to people and be friendly in a genuine, authentic point of view way. And I think the guy, Daniel Pink, actually mentioned, be authentic. That's the key thing about it. So that's really, really important. And I've grown to actually respect sales for what it does. And there are lots of new ideas that come into sales now that make it a lot easier for people to understand.
Respect sales. This is great. Respect sales. Respect people who are in sales. Respect yourself if you have to sell somebody on an idea. We're selling the listeners right now on our ideas. We had this a couple of episodes ago. Can't remember who I was talking to, but the same concept came up. We're always selling people on our ideas. So speaking of ideas, we do have some time left. And what I'd like for you to do, Tim, is think about a time in your life when you made a decision and it wasn't necessarily the best one. Let's call it a mistake or an error of judgment, but you got out of it by selling or persuading, negotiating. I can't remember all the words.
Yes.
Can you think of a time when that happened?
That's a really good question, Mindy. Really, really excellent question. I'm just thinking through. There were so many times in my life where I've actually made bad decisions and regretted. But I think if I tell you, I hinted at a bit earlier, I was doing my A levels, which are equivalent to when you're 18 or 19 before you go to university. I was destined to become a medic. Both sides of my family, all my mother's and my father's relations were all medics or doctors. And that was something, and I had a place at medical school, St Thomas's in London, to do medicine. And I fell in love in my final year. And what happened was, instead of focusing on my work and my studies, and it was actually it should have been a walk in the park, actually, because the grades they wanted for me to get in were ludicrously low in terms of, and it should have been a walk in the park. But actually, I didn't get the grades I needed. So I had to sit down and think, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? Because since at the age of 11, this is something I wanted to do. Until 18, I said, right, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to focus on. And when I got there and couldn't get in, I actually spent 12 hours in one medical school waiting for an interview. And still, they said on the day, you've got it, but I hadn't got it. Anyway, so I had a quick turn around and think to myself, what do I do next? And I decided the next best thing to do. I loved chemistry. I loved human body. So I did biochemistry and focused on poisons, which is toxicology. And I had then to persuade my parents, especially my father, who was absolutely adamant. At the age of 11, he said, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I have he suggested to me, medicine would be a good thing because you'll always have a job and all the rest of it. And actually at that age, I know you're quite influenced by your parents, but I thought actually that was the right thing to do, and it fitted me, the help element of things. And I had to persuade my parents that I wasn't going to pursue medicine anymore. And that was actually quite a difficult process. So what I had to do is actually understand where they were coming from. And it's one of the first rules that you taught later on. I didn't realize at the time, I was only 18. I hadn't any training in this. And, my views on selling were totally wrong. And I had to say, look, Mum and Dad, I realize you want me to do this, but at the moment I've tried this and I've done this and I retook my A levels and, got really, really great grades and all that and went on. But I had to turn around to them and say, look, I really want to do something else now. And this is what I'd like to do, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. And actually, it turned out really well, much, much better. I was dreading it, to be honest with you, Mindy. I was dreading it. If you can imagine, it's actually the thought of doing something is actually worse than actually doing it sometimes. So I remember walking into the lounge and they were just sat there and said, yeah, they said, what do you want to talk about? And I went, well, you know that I've been trying to get a medicine for lots and lots of years, but this is what I'd like to do, but I'd like to hear your views on it first before I tell you. So we had this conversation. And 30 minutes later, they actually said, no, we totally understand. Do what you need to do and we'll support you anyway. And that's the best thing I think parents can say around that. And that I had to persuade them that it was a good idea.
Oh, my goodness. And you've never stopped persuading in a thoughtful way. So this brings it to the theme of the podcast and all of my work, which has to do with putting more thought and the right kind of thought and consideration into what you do and what you say. So, Tim, you're an embodiment of this. This is why you've been invited onto the podcast. So I hope, and I know, in fact, that you've inspired some people listening. We get listeners of all different ages and all different backgrounds and all different stages of their life. There may be some who are very nervous about telling their parents something. It may be somebody's in a work situation or a relationship situation. So these skills actually go throughout our life and our work. So the final thing, I wish we had forever because you do have a lot of wisdom, but you do have more wisdom for people if they can seek you out and connect with you and follow you. So what are the best ways in which people can follow you and find you?
Oh, very simply, thank you, Mindy. That's very kind of you to say that. LinkedIn. I'm a great believer in LinkedIn. Just search me out, Tim Robertson Sales. In fact, just Google me, Tim Robertson Sales Consultant, and you'll find me. LinkedIn will come up first and foremost. And that's probably the best way. My, contact details are on there, or you can just message me, ask to connect with me and message me. I'll be delighted to chat to you and see whether I can help in any way. It'd be my pleasure.
Yes, and I think everybody gets that you are a helpful person, and it's great that you said message and connect like that. A lot of people these days are broadcasting their message, but really we need to have those conversations. To use that word that you used earlier, it's all about the conversation. So if you guys want to have a conversation with Tim, he's making himself available to you. And thank you for making yourself available to us today, sharing your wisdom on the Thoughtful Leader podcast. Thanks, Tim.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Mindy. It's been lovely being with you.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Thoughtful Leader, and I hope it's inspired you to be more thoughtful as a leader in your business. Please consider subscribing and leaving a review. An important question for you. Do you want to create a culture of thought leadership in your organization? My best-selling book, The Thoughtful Leader, is available now on Amazon and many other sites in paperback, ebook, and audiobook formats. Please visit www.mindygk.com for more great content. That's www.mindygk.com. Speak to you again soon.